How's it going, guys? My name's Wilson. Chris Paul has had an MVP caliber season so far for the Phoenix Suns, a struggling franchise for the last decade, and so far, currently second place in the Western Conference. Nobody in the world could have expected that. The 35-year-old playing like a superstar and one of the best point guards in the league still. Fantastic basketball. Yes, he deserves to be in the MVP conversation, although he likely won't win it. One of the best floor generals we ever seen. 35-year-olds doing things unheard of for a point guard. Most guys his size age pretty poorly, but Paul able to maintain his body to the best of his physical abilities. With that said, let's take a look at 35-year-old Chris Paul and where he ranks amongst the best 35-year-old point guards of all time. Of course, the greatest point guard in NBA history, Magic Johnson, forced to retire after positive for HIV before the start of the 92 season, came back at 36, but a little too late. Johnson averaged 14.6 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, still a solid player after missing 4 seasons. Would have been a superstar for at least 3 to 4 more years, so he's not on the list. Isaiah Thomas, on the other hand, the player who draws the most comparisons to CP, had a short career, playing his final NBA game before turning 33, toward his Achilles his final season. Hall of Famer Walt Frazier, Dave Bing played their final games at 34. Tiny Archibald retired at 35, averaged 7 points a game. Classic guys from the 70s, many didn't have long careers given the lack of technology and body treatment. Bob Cousy retired at 34 as well, but came back for 7 games at 41. Current point guards who will become future Hall of Famers, Steph Curry and Russell Westbrook, already 33 and 32, while Dame and Kyrie still ways away. Before naming other great point guards at 35, CP3 being in the MVP discussion, almost unheard of at this stage of his career, his size being 6 feet. When the bubble occurred, Paul balled out in the 2020 playoffs against the favorite Rockets, took them to 7, still averaged over 21.7.5 boards on 49% shooting, 26, 26, and 28-point performances in the 3 wins, nearly pulled off a huge upset, putting up over 16 points, 5 boards, 9 assists, very efficient 49% shooting, relatively healthy, maintaining his body after some big injuries early in New Orleans, relying more on being savvy and a master at the fundamentals, barely turns the ball over, still very elite defensive tendencies, one of the most skilled basketball players we ever seen. Remember, former Suns legend Steve Nash was an outlier when he won MVP, averaged just 15.5 points, 11 assists, 4th on his team in scoring, but his impact running the system earned him the most valuable player award. Sure, Paul's numbers aren't eye-popping, but he's better than any other player right now in the league, averaging less than 20 points in 2021, regarded top 15 to top 20 in many's eyes. Year 16, coming to a team that was already building some momentum, capping off an 8-0 record in the bubble, but missed the playoffs, being 34 and 39 overall. His impact always shows up in the record column. New Orleans, the #1 pick after he was traded. Clippers, a poverty franchise, turned that team around into playoff contenders. Houston was a win away from the finals if it wasn't for his injury, and got further with OKC than 2 of the Russ PG years, the driving force of the team with the #1 offensive rating. When Nash won MVP, Amari averaged 26, Devin Booker right now putting up 26, top 5 in clutch scoring, an incredible closer to this day, masterpiece 16-point fourth quarter and OT combined against Utah. If Phoenix somehow gets the #1 seed, Paul's MVP talks will still be in consideration. That's how great he is. Who knows what's in that secret stuff? Being able to reach that 10,000 assist 6th player to do so, the consistency and chemistry on point, becoming an all-star at this age too, after leading OKC to the postseason when they were projected to have a 1% chance. The $160 million man has become a huge bargain. When Rockets owner thought it was the worst contract all time, that statement's an absolute travesty. Paul finished 3rd for MVP his first season with the Clippers, finished 7th with the Thunder in 2020, a vocal leader especially behind the scenes. There aren't many players or people around the world that lives and breathes, studies basketball like CP3. Impeccable knowledge, sometimes too much for teammates to handle that are not on the same level. His highest assist numbers since his Clipper days. We knew all the other heavy MVP candidates competed in playoff teams last season and were supposed to be good. Nobody expected Phoenix to be like this. As for the other greats at 35, let's take a look at the legendary John Stockton, born March 26 for the final 13 games of the 97 season, averaged 13.6 points, over 10 assists, 2.2 steals, over 56% shooting, slow slow-paced defensive era in the postseason, had his signature moment, helped Utah advance to its first ever finals with a game-winning dagger to close out the Rockets. Averaged 16 points, nearly 10 assists, 52% shooting, similar numbers to Paul, although Stockton lost to MJ in the finals. The following season, missed 18 games due to injury. The team went 51-13 with him, 11-7 without, but slowed down a little bit with the scoring, put up 12.3 points, 8.9 assists, 53% shooting before turning 36. Smart and savvy, CP3 a better scorer than Stockton, but Stock made defensive second team in 97, third All-NBA team behind Tim Hardaway and Gary Payton at the point guard spot, even though he was past his prime. While Paul at 34 made second team All-NBA, will be on his way to making another All-NBA team in 2021, but Malone was the driving force and engine for that Jazz team, arguably the second best player at the time. Stockton finished 15 in MVP voting in 97, 13 in 98, wasn't even considered because of those missed games. Stockton wasn't named an All-Star in 98, but still amazing since Steve Book is not yet a top 10 player, nowhere near top 5, and Karl Malone was only clearly behind MJ. Stockton had the better option. I go with CP3, the tiny edge, over 35-year-old Stockton. As for Jason Kidd, born March 23rd, Dallas finished 7-6 after his birthday in 2008. Kidd put up 11.6 points, 7 rebounds, 9.5 assists, 2 steals, shot 44 from 3, still an all-star and lethal, but no longer a defensive team type guy, no longer an MVP candidate after 2004, but somewhat disappointing in the postseason. Lost to 22-year-old Chris Paul's Hornet in 5 games. Kidd got absolutely outplayed by the younger CP3, averaged 8.6 points, 6.5 boards, 7 assists, 42% from the field, struggled 1 of 6 in Game 4. Dallas a 50-win team with him the following season. Up till March 23rd of 09, Kidd averaged over 9 points, 8.5 assists, over 6 boards, 2 steals, still great all-around numbers, 42% from the field again, attempted under 8 shots a game. CP shoots it 12.5 times. Kidd didn't make the All-Star team and super borderline, made it the following season when Kobe wasn't available to suit up. Although Kidd was still effective, didn't take over scoring down the stretch, didn't create his own shot as well as Paul, nowhere close. Played with superstar Dirk and Jet Terry, replaced 35-year-old Kidd with 35-year-old Paul from the 08 Dallas team. Next to having Dirk, the Jet, and Josh Howard, I do believe Dallas goes further into the postseason. Advantage CP3. As for 35-year-old Steve Nash, born February 7th of 74 for the 09 season, 3 years removed from his MVP year, final 30 games, average 18 points, 10 rebounds, 54% shooting, team finished 19-11, but Amari missed the final 29 games of the season, which was why the Suns didn't qualify for the playoffs despite winning 46 games in the tough West. Phoenix lineup with old Shaq, old Grant Hill, Jason Richardson, Matt Barnes, and Barbosa. Nash was also left out the All-Star team with CP and D. Will at the height of their back and forth arguments for the number 1 point guard debate. But in 2010, Nash was unreal, averaged 18.4 points, over 11 assists on 52% shooting, 44 from 3 through 52 games as a 35-year-old. Absolutely balled out in the playoffs at 36, taking the Lakers to 6. Having Amari earn second team all honors with his body of work, Nash was 8 for MVP that season. I have to say, he's neck and neck with CP3 as a 35-year-old. Paul better on defense, Nash the better offensive player and shooter. Having Jay Rich, Grant Hill, Amari, Robin Lopez, Channing Frye, and Dragic off the bench, Nash averaged 22 in the sweep over San Antonio. Paul will be 36 by the 2021 postseason. 35-year-old Nash very even with 35-year-old Paul, the 2 guards to make first team over Nash that season. Obviously Kobe and D Wade. While it's not a guaranteed Paul will even make second team, given the loaded perimeter guys today, unless Paul leads Phoenix to the semis or the conference finals, I'm still gonna go with 2010 Nash a tiny bit over 2020 Paul for now, but it's a very close call. I can see an argument for both. Paul of course much better in his 20s than Nash, but in their 30s, Nash was insanely efficient and unstoppable with the Suns offense. On to Oscar Robertson, who averaged 11.5 points, 6.5 assists, 4 boards, his final 50 regular season games. No longer an all-star, put up just 14 points, 9.5 assists in the postseason, an uneventful 6 points, 2 of 13 shooting. Game 7 of the finals, final game of his career. Teammates Bobby Danrich and Lucius Allen were better at that point. CP better than the 35-year-old Big O. While Gary Payton at 35 played for the 04 Lakers, the only Laker to be fully healthy that year, came off an all-star season at 34, averaged over 20 points, 8 assists with Seattle or Milwaukee, but diminished a little little bit. 14.6 points, 4 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 47% from the field. 2 years removed from his All-NBA team appearance. No longer all-defense type player. A season filled with distraction and drama. Team was running out of fumes. Malone on his last legs. GP regressed heavily in the playoffs. Averaged just 7.8 points, 5.3 assists, 35 minutes. Shot under 37% from the field. Never cracked above 20 points in any of those postseason games. Got absolutely lit up by prime Chauncey Billups in the finals. Peyton averaged a horrendous 4.2 points, 4.4 assists, 32% shooting from the field against Detroit. Viewed as a role player at the time, Peyton barely gets mentioned for his lack of production against the Pistons, but delivered with Miami 2 years later. If the 04 Lakers team had 2021 current version of CP3 instead of 04 GP, no doubt LA would have won the championship. Chauncey Billups at 35, a teammate of CP's, started at the 2 for 20 games, averaged 15 points, but suffered a torn Achilles. Still a good player the season before, but in all honesty, 09 Billups of the Nuggets and his impact reminds me of Paul a lot, what he's been doing this season. Chauncey was 32 at the time. Tim Hardaway 2002, averaged 9.6 points, a role player by then, retired the following season. Dennis Johnson's final season, 7.1 points, 6.5 boards with Boston in 90, while the great Lenny Wilkins was amazing at 35, averaged 20.5 points, 8.5 assists for the 73 Cavs, an all-star, but his team finished just 32 and 50, 16 on the MVP list at 6'1", legendary player and coach, slender left hand, a basketball genius as well, fantastic, but not as great as CP3 as a player. Although Jerry West considered a shooting guard by many, West actually was the primary ball handler in the 70s, with Gail Goodrich playing more of the two. West turned 35, his final game of the 73 season, averaged 23.6 points, 4.5 boards, 7.8 assists in those playoffs. His final year in 1974, limited to just 31 games, averaged 20.3 points, 6.5 assists, had a groin injury, but felt he didn't live up to his standards. Despite being an all-star, he retired. While Gail Goodrich was the better player by then, out of every 35-year-old point guards, the only player I consider to be right up there neck and neck with Chris Paul, Nash was even more efficient. I give him the edge on offense over CP, but with defense, Paul got the edge. Although it's a really tight call, Paul was ahead of 97 and 98 Stockton in my opinion, clearly ahead of Kidd, Oscar, and West. Paul's greatness will never be questioned. Whether he wins a title or not, great point guards are usually fully done by 35. Former rival Darren Williams out the league for 4 years now at 32. CP3 being in the same breath with Stockton and Nash aging like wine. If Paul leads the Suns to the finals at 36 and beat a team like the Lakers or Clippers to get there, I'll consider him to be better than 2010 Nash, but I still give Steve the tiny little edge so far. Who do you guys think is the best point guard at Chris Paul's current age all time? Is it 2021 Paul, where he will lead the Suns to the playoffs for the first time since 2010 when Steve Nash was 35 or 36 years old? For those of you who watched the NBA in 2010, let me know in the comments below who's better, 2010 Nash or 2021 Paul. I'd love to hear your takes. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I talk NBA comparisons, amazing storylines, NBA history, anything basketball that will interest you. So if you love the NBA, hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much once again. I love all of you. See you next time.